My name is Layla. I was the principal systems architect for one of the fastest scaling enterprise software platforms in the US. For nearly 9 years, I built its skeleton, its heartbeat, and every invisible nerve that made it feel alive. They used to call me the ghost in the machine. I didn't mind. It meant I was essential, even if no one wanted to say it out loud. That afternoon, I came back from lunch 7 minutes late. I'd been on the phone with a plumber trying to schedule a repair for a leaking valve in my new apartment. The building smelled like paint and false promises. When I walked into the office, something was off. The light felt colder. My desk wasn't mine anymore. Two men I'd never seen before were sitting there like it was theirs, flipping through my notes and hovering over my laptop like it carried disease. One of them finally spoke, eyes still on my screen. I'd been terminated, access revoked. They were here to collect company assets. That word again, assets, like my hands, like my brain, like the 8 million lines of code I'd carried through more nights than I could count. I didn't argue. I didn't ask why. I just nodded like I'd seen it coming. Because honestly, I had. I placed my unfinished kale wrap next to the monitor they'd already fingerprinted. Said I needed to grab my purse. Instead, I bent down and peeled a narrow piece of duct tape from the underside of my chair. The USB slid into the inside pocket of my blazer like it had always belonged there. I straightened, smiled once, and walked straight past the motivational quote hanging outside the HR suite. We rise by lifting others. What a joke. The elevator dinged before I even pressed the button. Maybe that was a coincidence. Maybe it wasn't. The guy at the front desk didn't look up as I passed, and I didn't slow down. It was better that way. By the time I reached the parking lot, my phone buzzed in my coat. Not a text, a system alert. The timestamp alone told me what I needed to know. They didn't just fire me. They tried to steal me, all of me. And in doing that, they woke something up. Something they never understood. Something I never explained. Because I built it for myself. And it only ever listened to me. I didn't look back as the doors closed behind me. The lobby smelled like burnt coffee and corporate denial. Outside, the sun was too bright for what had just happened. I slipped into the driver's seat of my car, locked the doors, and pulled out my phone. Not the company-issued one. Mine. The one with the app I'd built in secret years ago, coded under a project name no one had ever bothered to ask about. Argus. A system designed to watch silently until it had a reason not to. I tapped it once. The screen lit up with a simple command line and a single blinking dot. Then the logs started rolling. Unauthorized access attempt. Internal escalation of privileges. Manual override flag triggered. Each line felt like a heartbeat in reverse. They were already inside my system, or they thought they were. But Argus didn't roll over for strangers. I'd built it after the first time they tried to demote me without warning. Back when I realized good work didn't matter as much as being liked by the right VP. So I created a safety net. Not out of paranoia, but out of pattern recognition. The USB in my pocket wasn't the only failsafe. Argus had subroutines buried beneath layers of compliance-friendly code. Quiet watchers, soft tripwires, and now they were lit up like a Christmas tree. I scrolled through the timestamps and let out a slow breath. Someone had triggered the first tier. That meant they weren't just looking. They were trying to take ownership. That was the mistake. You can't clone what you don't understand. I leaned back in my seat and let the AC hum for a minute. No music, just the soft static of a storm I knew was coming. The kind I'd already prepared for. Argus had been waiting, not for permission, not for revenge, just for proof. And now, it had plenty. The first real alert came 10 minutes after I left the building. I was sitting in my car, letting the AC hit my face, watching traffic crawl past like nothing had changed. But everything had. Argus pinged once, then again. The second one wasn't just noise. It was the signature I'd buried years ago, the one that only activated if someone tried to rewrite system-level permissions. They weren't just accessing data. They were rewriting ownership paths, trying to make my system forget who built it. I smiled barely, just a tug at the corner of my mouth. They thought I'd walk away clean while they carved my name out of the foundation. But Argus wasn't a tool. It was a warning with sharp edges. They didn't realize the system they were poking had teeth. Another ping. This one showed a manual override attempt on the security daemon. That meant someone was trying to impersonate root access, likely with credentials they didn't earn. Maybe they copied my profile. Maybe they thought that was enough. It wasn't. Argus didn't verify logins. It reads behavior. And right now the system sees a stranger pretending to be me. There was no need to respond. Not yet. The script I'd left in place would do its job. First it would isolate, then the flag, then record. And if they pushed too far, it would mislead them just enough to make them think they'd won. That was always the trick. Let them think the keys worked before the floor collapsed under them. I tapped once to acknowledge the alert, then shut the screen off. The silence inside the car felt dense, clean, controlled. They thought they'd fired me. What they really did was activate the lockout sequence on a living system. And the thing about living systems is this: they fight back. The text came in while I was folding towels at the laundromat. It was from Milo, my old intern, the one who used to forget his badge twice a week and once spilled boba tea on my backup server. Sweet kid. Terrible instincts under pressure, but a fast learner. His message was 6 words. Everything's down. They're saying your name. I didn't need to ask what he meant. Argus had clearly moved into phase 2. I kept folding like nothing was wrong. Not because I was hiding anything, because everything was happening exactly as it was supposed to. Milo sent another message. Finance can't process payments. DevOps is stuck in a loop. Legal's on fire. I imagined the office buzzing with panic. Directors pacing with caffeine breath. Middle managers pretending to understand infrastructure. Probably someone printing out the system logs and highlighting them like that would help. I texted back one word. Stability. The typing bubble appeared, then vanished, then reappeared. Finally, he wrote, "It's eating its own audit trails." I smiled at that one, not because I enjoyed the chaos, but because it meant the trust locks were still working, that Argus hadn't let the intruder settle in. It recognized corruption and was doing exactly what it had been trained to do. Contain, confuse, punish. The funny thing was, none of them would even realize what was happening. Not fully. They'd assume a version mismatch or a permissions conflict. They'd call vendors, restart services, blame integration issues. Anything except the truth. The truth was that they tried to amputate the mind behind their entire data backbone, and in the process, they hit a defense reflex. One built not on revenge, but pattern recognition. You don't stab a body and expect the nerves to keep cooperating. Another ping came through. A screenshot from Milo. It was a company-wide Slack thread. Someone had tagged everyone with a vague message about a cascading sync error. There was panic in the replies, buzzwords flying. And then at the bottom, a single comment from someone in compliance. Who had access to the kernel overrides before the last patch? I could have answered that. But I didn't. Instead, I switched out my laundry and bought a coffee from the corner vending machine that tasted like wet paper. I stood there in that blinking fluorescent light, surrounded by humming dryers, and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Control. They thought they were tightening a noose around my role, but all they'd really done was release the safety cap on a system they never took the time to understand. I sipped my coffee and waited. Argus was awake, and it wasn't done yet. I logged into our GitHub mirror the moment I got back to my apartment. I'd kept a shadow key tied to a forgotten user profile. HR probably thought it belonged to a long-gone contractor. It didn't. The commit history looked wrong. Too clean. Too frequent. Someone was pushing code at a rate no real engineer would trust. No testing flags, no failover toggles, no trace of hesitation. Just replacements. I filtered by author. That's when I saw it. A username I didn't recognize tied to a profile that had only existed for 6 weeks. Sophia TR. Her commit messages read like marketing copy. Refactor the schema for efficiency. Update logic modules to align with strategic goals. Strategic goals. My system didn't run on strategy. It ran on logic, survival, and trust. Every line was written with scars. Late nights, missed birthdays, heartbreaks with logs to prove it. What was she writing? It was empty. Then I found the pull request. A massive one, titled Middleware Port Final. My stomach went still. I opened the diff log. She wasn't improving the system. She was stripping it, turning it into something docile, something manageable. They weren't just replacing me. They were cloning me, trying to replicate the architecture without the architect. Sophia's profile picture looked like it had been filtered into oblivion. Perfect lighting, carefully curated keywords in her bio. I checked her org chart link, reporting directly to the COO. Of course, she was their answer to me. But they forgot one thing. Systems don't obey resumes. I pulled up Argus and dove into the behavioral logs. Sure enough, it had flagged Sophia's token attempt last week, the one where she tried to authorize a change to the core kernel routines. The system hadn't just denied her. It had blacklisted her fingerprint, tagged it as hostile, and activated silent watch mode. From that moment, every line she touched was recorded. Every meeting she joined, every login, every Slack thread. Captured, encrypted, archived. And I watched it all. They thought they could build a new version of me. One who smiled more in meetings and didn't ask why. One who ships features without ethics. One who followed orders. But the soul of a system isn't in its functions. It's in the boundaries it refuses to cross. Sophia never had a chance. Not because she lacked skill, but because she lacked memory. And memory was the one thing Argus preserved better than anything else. What they tried to steal wasn't just mine. It was me. And Argus remembered. I waited until just after midnight. That's when traffic on the server usually dipped below the audit threshold. Fewer eyes, fewer questions. Just the soft hum of automation cycling in silence. I opened Argus and entered the key phrase. Protocol, Nix. It wasn't dramatic. No fireworks, no alarms. Just a confirmation prompt and a single heartbeat icon turning from green to amber. Nix didn't crash systems. She didn't scream. She whispered. The next morning, reports started surfacing. A vendor portal rendering in Spanish despite default settings. A load balancer is stalling only on odd-numbered minutes. Invoice IDs increment by the Fibonacci sequence. None of it is fatal. All of it is maddening. Sophia wouldn't even know where to start. Nix had been built as a surgical countermeasure. Her job wasn't to destroy. It was to corrode trust quietly until leadership started doubting the very code they were trying to keep. Every anomaly looked like user error. Every delay is like a bug someone else introduced. Meanwhile, Argus sat silent, observing, logging, adjusting. By the end of the day, patch requests had tripled. QA flagged inconsistencies in baseline behavior. DevOps blamed DNS propagation. Security pinged AWS. Everyone pointed fingers, but no one pointed up. That was the genius of it. I didn't need to be in the room. I just needed them to realize the room wasn't listening anymore. Sophia, if she were paying attention, would start to feel it. The sensation that something had slipped, that the system she thought she'd tamed was now watching her instead. That's how you disarm a clone, not with brute force, but with silence and inevitability. I logged out of Argus and closed my laptop. Nyx was moving on her own now, and I didn't need to do anything else. Not yet. The first leak hit Reddit just after lunch, a blurry screenshot from an internal Slack thread. Someone had panicked and posted it in the wrong channel, then tried to delete it, but not before half the dev team screenshotted it. At the bottom of the thread was a single line posted by a phantom user no one recognized. You cloned the system, but forgot the soul. By dinner, it was everywhere. Tech blogs latched onto it like wolves on a fresh kill. Comment sections lit up with conspiracy theories, speculation, and memes. Someone even turned the quote into a minimalist t-shirt that sold out in 2 hours. I watched it unfold from my living room barefoot, eating cereal straight from the box. No press release could outrun what was coming. The system wasn't just misbehaving now, it was speaking. And worse, it had style. Reporters started calling the incident the echo glitch. Internal messages surfaced. Phrases like unauthorized middleware fork and executive-level override request started trending. Everyone knew something had gone wrong, but no one could agree on who lit the match. And that was the point. This wasn't just exposure. It was erosion. Slow, deliberate, designed to unravel not just trust in the platform, but in the people behind it. They wanted to erase me, rewrite my work, replace it with something sterile and obedient. Instead, they handed me the stage, and I hadn't even stepped on it yet. By the time I logged back into the system, everything was already in motion. The Violet protocol had been triggered, and I hadn't even had to lift a finger. It was already working quietly exactly as I'd designed it. Sophia had vanished, like a ghost who never existed. No trace in the code, no commits, no comments, just a blank spot where her name used to be. If anyone tried to find her, they wouldn't even know where to look. Meanwhile, the system began publishing its own evidence. Logs from the last 6 months, private chats between executives, internal emails detailing the full scope of their plan to replace me with Sophia. Everything was there neatly time-stamped and ready for public consumption. I didn't make a move. I didn't send a single message. I let them unravel on their own, watching from the shadows as their carefully crafted story started to collapse. Each new leak fed the frenzy, every new discovery deepening the pit they were digging. The company's leadership, which had once prided itself on disruptive innovation, was now scrambling. No one knew who to blame, so they blamed everyone. The CTO pointed fingers at DevOps. Legal circled their wagons and tried to contain the damage. No one had the courage to admit that they'd been caught in a web of their own greed and ambition. While they floundered, the media began to pick up the story. I wasn't the one breaking it. I wasn't the one leaking the emails or the Slack threads. The system was doing it on its own. Argus had done its job. Violet had ensured it would be out in the world, visible for everyone to see. And now every headline was calling my name. It wasn't just the tech blogs. It was the big players. Wired, Bloomberg. Even a few respected business analysts started chiming in. They were trying to paint me as a whistleblower, a victim of corporate espionage. But the truth was simpler than that. I hadn't been fired. I'd been erased. But I wasn't a victim. I was the architect of this whole mess. And now everyone knew it. I watched it all calm and detached from the comfort of my own couch. The chaos unfolding was exactly what I'd anticipated. They'd tried to take credit for my work, my creation, and when they failed, they tried to bury me. They didn't realize that their attempts to replace me would be their undoing. Layla was gone, they thought. But the system I'd built my soul was still very much alive. It had memories. It had rules. And it had a voice that once it was freed could never be silenced. The phone rang at exactly 3:42 p.m. It was Martin from DevOps sounding frantic. He said the Zurich audit pipeline was failing, and they couldn't figure out why. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Another call came. This time it was the CEO, Aaron. He left a voicemail. "Layla, we need your help. We've made a mess of everything. Please, we need to talk." I smiled, leaning back in my chair. They needed me now. They'd erased me, and now they were begging for help. They'd always thought I was replaceable. They'd always thought they could just plug someone else into my role. Now they saw how wrong they were. But it wasn't about helping them. It was about watching them crash and burn on their own. It was about showing them what happens when you disrespect the person who built everything. It was about making them realize that nothing could survive without the person who had created it. And now they knew. The media wasn't the only thing that had changed. The public perception of the company was in free fall. Investors began pulling out clients, started demanding answers, and even the employees, the ones who had stood by while I was pushed out, began to question everything. They knew deep down what had happened. I hadn't needed to say a word. I hadn't needed to raise a finger. My work had spoken for itself. The system had exposed them, and they were too proud and too stupid to stop it. The beauty of it was that they were so sure they were untouchable. And in the end, they were the ones who destroyed themselves. I'd won without ever stepping into the ring, and that was the sweetest victory of all. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped out onto the familiar marble floors. But it felt different this time. Everything looked the same. The glossy walls, the fake smiles, the hurried footsteps of employees pretending like they weren't watching me. But I wasn't the same. I wasn't the person they fired. I was the one who had built this place, and now it was time for them to remember it. I didn't walk in with anger. I didn't need to. I had already won, and the truth was undeniable. I didn't want my job back. What I wanted was acknowledgement. What I wanted was an apology, something more than the hollow words they'd fed me when they first dismissed me. The CEO's office was just down the hall, the same office where they had sat high above it all, thinking they could erase me with a signature. Now I was about to make him face the reality of what they'd done. I didn't knock. I walked in like I owned the place, because in a way I did. Aaron was standing by his desk, his eyes darting around the room like he was waiting for something to save him. When he saw me, he froze. The realization hit him hard and fast. He was cornered. No more corporate jargon, no more excuses. It was time for him to face the truth. I didn't speak first. I just placed the flash drive on his desk, the one labeled in bold letters, "Backup Trust Media." His hands shook slightly as he picked it up. I let him hold it for a moment, then I leaned in just close enough to make my point. I told him, "Everything you lost is on there." I wasn't asking for anything except the one thing I'd been denied respect. But I didn't leave it at that. I gave him conditions, simple, straightforward. First, he would have to publicly resign, acknowledging his role in the entire mess. Second, all my unvested stock options and bonuses would be paid out retroactive. Third, I wanted Sophia's name wiped from history. She didn't build this, I did, and she would never be associated with my work again. I watched him nod. His shoulders slumped, as if the weight of the world had fallen on him in that single moment. He didn't argue. He didn't fight it. He knew. And I knew he knew. I left his office without another word. No grand gestures, no speeches, just the echo of my footsteps on the cold marble floors. And as I passed through the security gate one last time, I heard the click of my badge being deactivated. I didn't look back. There was no need to. I'd done what I came to do. I wasn't here for revenge. I was here to show them that nothing, no one can replace the soul of something built with heart. And if they didn't understand that, now they never would. Before I left, I sent one final message. It wasn't for Aaron. It wasn't for anyone at that company. It was for me. The message read, "Let them remember," and I knew they would.